Hello everyone and welcome to this NOS live streamed event. My name's Emily Gottlieb and I'm the Chief Executive of the National Opera Studio. It's my great pleasure to welcome all our viewers to this In Conversation evening, which is being broadcast live through YouTube. The National Opera Studio is the UK's leading opera training organisation, and we work in partnership with the 6 leading opera companies of this country, English National Opera, Glyndebourne, Royal Opera House, Opera North, Welsh National Opera and Scottish Opera. And each year the studio selects around 16 young artists to come and train with us. They have 9 months of very intensive training at the studio, preparing them to enter the career, and we have about 625 alumni, including tonight's guest artist. And they can be found all around the world on stages and in opera companies around the world. What makes the studio special is the quality of our fantastic coaching. And I'm delighted to also say that our guest artist tonight is also one of our regular coaches. And so I'd just like to say thank you very much for coming on to Susan Bullock, an NOS alumna and fantastic, wonderful, stellar soprano, Susan Bullock CBE. It's my great pleasure to introduce you to this evening. In interviewing Sue, as you can see, will be young artist Benson Wilson in his first interview role this evening. We're live on YouTube, which gives you the opportunity to also pose your own questions to Sue. The NOS team is standing by to receive these in the YouTube chat function, the live chat screen, and alternatively you can email them to info@nationaloperastudio.org.uk, and the team will then feed these questions to Benson. The NOS is delighted to make this event available to all for free. However, like many other arts organisations, the effects of this terrible pandemic has had a big impact on us and on our income. If you are able or feel able to make a donation, however small, do please visit our website on www.nationaloperastudio.org.uk/donate today. And all that's left for me to do now is to hand over to Benson to wish you a very pleasant evening, thank our guests, and over to you, Benson.
Thank you very much for that, Emily. Good evening all today who have tuned in live on YouTube, and a special good evening to our very special guest this evening, Susan Bullock. In Samoa we say talofa lava.
Hello Benson, nice to be with you.
Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm okay, yes, I'm fine. It's a different world from the world I'm used to, but yeah, I'm okay. It's certainly been challenging, and trying to find lots of things to do to keep sane and keep my hand in, so to speak, and make sure that, when we do get out of this, we're all ready to go again.
Yeah, really looking forward to getting out. I'm so privileged tonight to be able to interview you tonight and just have a little conversation with you on behalf of all the young artists at the National Opera Studio, as well as those who are tuning in live tonight. I'm sure we're all excited to learn more about you. Your CV is this long, goes out of my screen at the top and down the bottom as well. But I'm very excited to ask you, so how did you get into classical music? Is your family musical?
Well, it was kind of a mistake, really. My dad and my mum for a certain time, but my dad for all his career was in the police force. We didn't have any musical life, really. My grandparents in Wales sang and played in silver bands, but it was all very much on the local level. But it was only when my brother came home at the age of 14, he's 6 years older than me, so I will have been 8, and announced that he wanted to learn the piano. We didn't have a piano, so my dad, who was pounding the beat as a policeman, found a piano on a rubbish tip and had it delivered to our house, and that was our piano. And of course, anything my brother did, I had to copy as the annoying little sister. So that's how I got into it, and it was all a bit of a mistake, really. Yeah.
And so from that piano that you found in the rubbish, is that where your musical, like the beginning of your musicality and your musical career? Do you think it all stems from this one piano that was found by your father in the rubbish bin?
It might well have done. I think also the fact that from a tiny little girl, I used to sing. I used to sing myself to sleep. I used to annoy everybody by singing, lying in bed singing when everybody was relaxing downstairs. It was all rubbish. I mean, it wasn't sort of proper music, but Yeah, I suppose I always did sing, and I always wanted to be in the school choir and that kind of thing. But I think a lot of that was just wanting to be involved in those sort of events, as not particularly because it was music, particularly because it was a thing to be in and a fun thing to be in. So I suppose, yeah, from learning the piano, then I kind of carried on and became more interested and got to know a bit more about music, and sort of began to think, yeah, this is what I'd like to do, really.
That's amazing that you recall yourself singing to yourself
Yeah.
at a young age. Do you remember what the song was?
I used to be put up. Now, a lot of people, young people won't know this, but there was a singer called Frank Ifield, and he used to
Frank
sing a song called
Ifield.
I Remember You. And I used to be put on the butcher's counter in my little outfit to sing I Remember You for all the customers in the shop. I mean, that's the earliest performance ever, probably, of my life. I was probably about 3. But I used to just sing popular songs to myself, or I'd make them up, you know. So.
That's amazing. Was there someone in particular that heard your voice and said, you know what, you should start having singing lessons? When did you start having singing lessons?
That wasn't till I was about 17, actually. And again, that was a bit of a mistake. I changed school in the middle of the sixth form, which was another whole story. But I ended up in a school where I needed to catch up. I was a little bit behind. So I needed to catch up, and I decided to go, or they advised me to go to the Royal Northern College of Music junior school on a Saturday morning, which meant that you did harmony and counterpoint as well as your practical studies, which would kind of help me to catch up. But I didn't have a second study. I only had the piano, and you had to have 2 instruments. So my brother came back into the scene and said, well, look, you can sing in tune. It's fine. It's just, filling the requirements. And I learned a couple of songs and went and sang. And they asked me to come back again in the afternoon. And I thought, oh, I'm in here with the piano. This is all great. And they said, could you sing? And they brought in the very famous tenor, Alexander Young, who was the original Tom Rakewell, actually, in the Rake's Progress. But at that point, he was the head of vocal studies at the Royal Northern College of Music. And they said, would you sing to him? And I thought, what's this about? I'm not here to sing. I'm here to play the piano. But he said, look, I really think you should start having singing lessons. And we'll take you on a Saturday morning and we'll find you a nice singing teacher. And, so I started at 17.
Jeez, I myself, I thought I started singing lessons late. I started when I was 15. And it was also by accident. It was someone who heard me singing in the music practice rooms. And I found it better to go to my singing lesson than to stay in maths on a Thursday morning.
I totally agree. I'm with you there 150%.
Am I right in what I've heard? Was piano your first instrument?
Well, it was, yes, it was. But when they asked me to go and have singing lessons, I was very adamant that I should keep with the piano as well. I didn't want to just give that up. And I said, well, as long as I could still have piano lessons. But eventually, the singing just took over. And the school I was at had lots of choirs and opportunities. And yeah, I didn't go there full time when I left school because I didn't really know enough about it. I'd only been doing it for sort of 18 months, not even. Yeah. So I decided to go to university and read music, because I thought that would give me a broader spectrum. I knew music was going to be my career, but I wasn't quite sure how. And when singing was kind of in the back of my mind as, a possibility. And the same teacher, Alexander Young, found me a teacher in London, Marjorie Thomas, who was the head of vocal studies at the Royal Academy of Music. So I used to go to her house on Saturday mornings when I was at university and have lessons. And then I carried on with her when I went as a postgraduate to the academy. Wow,
it sounds like it was all planned out for you, even though you did not know.
By chance, yeah. Yeah. Not me organising it.
That's amazing. I just want to touch on a point that has come up. You said that you always wanted to be in choirs and you wanted to sing in choirs. I know that the Welsh have a very strong choral tradition, just like New Zealand. And I was surprised, a lot of people say that New Zealand is like the Southern Hemisphere version of Wales in terms of rugby and choral music. And we
can discuss the rugby. We can discuss the rugby at a later date. But yeah, I'm with you about the music. I mean, when I was a child, I didn't see my grandparents only 2 or 3 times a year because, that's how life was. We didn't have Skype and stuff. We just went on holiday to their house 2 or 3 times a year. So I would occasionally hear a concert in the village in the church or but it wasn't certainly something that we did in our family home back in Cheshire,
Yeah.
It was sort of there on the outside.
Oh, that's amazing that you even had these concerts going on. I grew up in South Auckland, and we have no classical music scene.
No.
But I also want to touch in terms of the choir. How do you think choral music or choral training had an input into your musicality or the way that you approach any of the music from leaving Cheshire?
That's a good question.
Onwards.
When I went to university, I joined the chapel choir. I went to Royal Holloway, which was part of the University of London, and they have a chapel choir which kind of runs similar lines to Cambridge and Oxford. That's sort of the choral tradition there. So I was singing in a choir every morning at 8:45. I was singing services on a Friday night, on a Sunday night, rehearsing, and what it did, it was absolutely brilliant for sight reading, for a start. You learn, you've got to do things really fast. You haven't got time to take it home and study it. You get up, you open your mouth, you sing, and 5 minutes later it's happening. And also the discipline, I think, of having to be in that choir, having to turn up on time, all that was really valuable. And I think, sort of stayed with me.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on that because I myself also got into classical music, and choral music was the core driver in my musicality and learning how to read music. Unfortunately, I didn't learn how to read music until I went to university, but I owe so much to choral music, and it's so wonderful to hear that even Susan Bullock was in a choir, surely in the alto 2 section, because with a soprano like yours, surely.
No, I had a nice little tweety, boyish voice, and it was a real pleasure. I loved it. I really am grateful for that time in that choir. And then when I left university and was starting to sing, was going to the academy as a postgraduate, all the way through university. In fact, I also had a job at Farm Street Church in Mayfair. Every Sunday, I would get on the train and go to Farm Street and sing mass in a professional choir there for the princely sum of £6 a service. And that was great. And I kept that up until I was performing professionally, actually. And then it all got a bit too much to be having to sing Pamina one night at the ENO and then get to be in rehearsal at 8:45 on a Sunday morning.
The next morning, waking up to sing in the choir.
It was pretty heavy duty, so I gave that up.
Oh, that's amazing to hear that you even did that while you were at Royal Academy of Music. Speaking of Royal Academy of Music, how was your time back then, and how do you feel like, because surely they invite you back, how do you feel like the conservatoire scene in London has changed? How was it back then?
Well, I went there as a postgraduate, so it was already different from people who went there when they were 16, 17, 18. I was already 21. And basically, I think it was my teacher's way of making me finally open up the opera school book, because I wouldn't do it. And I only wanted to sing in concerts. And she said, you have got to learn operas. You've got to learn arias. And then I joined the opera class. But I was only there for just over 2 years, because in the middle of my second year, I auditioned for Glyndebourne Chorus and got a job in the chorus. So I disappeared, I think it was in the April term, to go to Glyndebourne in 1983. I had a great time. It was pretty intense. They didn't have a separate opera school like they do now. A lot of the colleges then just everybody, it was an all-comers event. There was no kind of separate specific course. So I was forced by my teacher into the audition room for the opera. And I was lucky. I did the title role of Semele. I did the Queen of the Night.
Ooh.
I did Anne Truelove, and I did Miss Wordsworth in Albert Herring, all in that small space of just around 2 years, and then I was gone. Yeah,
Queen of the Night, and then what. We'll get there. We'll get there. But speaking of Academy and the London scene, it's so good to hear that someone as yourself went through the same things that us young singers now are going through. I know so many of my colleagues would really appreciate to hear that you also sang in choirs.
Of course.
And it's really, 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 really nice to hear that the struggle has been the same ever since then, right up until now, and probably until the end.
I'm sure. Well, I think, everybody's got to kind of make some money somehow, and if you can get into a professional choir like I did when I was already at university, it was great. It helped pay for my singing lessons.
That's amazing. We got to do what you have to do what you have to do. I made coffees all throughout my undergrad for about 4 years at the Auckland International Airport. Another thing that I feel really inspired by you about is that you're alumni of the National Opera Studio.
Alumna, I think is the correct.
Sorry,
don't ask me about
English.
Latin,
is my second language.
Samoan
is my
alumni
first.
is fine. I'm an old girl, put it that way. The National Opera Studio.
How was it back then?
Well, yeah, it was again. It was in a totally different place. It was in Morley College, which is right opposite Lambeth North Tube. We had the basement. It was pretty gloomy. Wow. There were all sorts of other courses going on around us up in the other parts of the building. It was pretty intense down there. It was like a sort of little Nibelheim of singers, just doing their thing. I think in a lot of ways it was quite similar to what happens at NOS now in terms of, coaching lessons happening with different people and different directors coming in to work with you. And we had little trips away to do concerts and orchestra. So, it's a bit like you guys all going on your residencies and going to Wales and going to Scotland and meeting all the different companies. So, it didn't have quite the sort of the glamour surroundings of Wandsworth, but it was an intense course, which I think it is now as well.
Oh, that's awesome to hear. So there are many coaches that we see throughout the year, and we get so many pearls of wisdom. Are there any coaches that you remember from your time at NOS that really inspired you? And if so, what did they bring and add to your career?
Well, I think when I was there, the chap who was in charge was a singer called Michael Langdon, who was a very famous bass. He'd retired from being a bass, but he was a very famous Baron Ox and all that kind of stuff. And he was very practical and very down to earth. And you'd go in for a coaching with him, and he would just sort of say, "Why are you singing it like that?" And I would say, "Well, isn't that how it's meant to go?" And he'd go, "Sing it in your voice. Always sing something in your voice. Don't try and copy what you hear from or think it should go like. It's got to come from you." And that was really, I think, something that stuck with me. That you have to be very honest. There's no point trying to imitate a recording of somebody else. The performance doesn't mean a thing if it's not genuinely coming from you. So he was a great inspiration. We had the wonderful Martin Esep, who had a great career in opera, as well as being a fantastic accompanist for leader recitals. So, he was great. And we had people like David Cyrus coming in from Covent Garden, and
nice.
there were some very interesting people who were Nicholas Braithwaite, who now lives in Australia, coming in and giving us their pearls of wisdom. So. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing to hear. And we've just received a question from Emma, and it's very relevant to now because she'd like to ask you, how would you advise a young person who loves opera but doesn't know where to start?
Gosh, that is a good question. I would suggest, now of course you can't see any operas live, sadly for the moment, but if you want to do that now, during this time of lockdown, I would say find something that's quite short. Listen to the popular ones, listen to La Bohème, listen to Carmen, listen to La Traviata. Don't go for the 6-hour Wagners yet, warm up for that, build up to it. Listen to stuff that you probably might not know, but when you hear it, you'll realize that you do know a lot of the melodies from, because they're used in other ways. Go for the popular ones, go for the short ones. Listen to opera in English as well, which is also probably more accessible. And take a chance, really.
Oh, thanks for that. I also wanted to touch in, I hope that answered your question, Emma. I got some very useful advice from that. I wanted to ask, because I've seen that you've done competitions before, and competitions are a very, actually, I won't say anything. I will ask you, what do you think about competitions?
Well, competitions, what can we say? They're a necessary evil, I think. That's the thing. There are so many singers. There are so many singers coming out of conservatoires and colleges and, universities, wherever. And competitions are a way of getting seen and getting heard. And I think there's a lot of pressure on people to win competitions, but it's not always the people who win the competitions that actually then go on to have successful careers.
That's right.
So I think, if you've been in a competition and you haven't won the first prize or even the second prize, don't despair, because somebody on that panel might remember you in a year's time and say, oh, I remember that person. They should come and audition for this or that. I think it's a way of sifting through the huge numbers of singers. And they are hard, they're tough and they're demanding, but then so is the profession. So, you've got to start learning how hard it is early on, I think, And of course, the financial gains from competitions can be the difference between being able to study somewhere or not. So it's really important that you learn a lot of repertoire and you meet a lot of people. So I think the good outweighs the bad.
Definitely. Thank you very much for that answer. I know a lot of people, my colleagues at the National Opera Studio, we talk about competitions so many times, in the lunchroom, and a lot of things that stop us young singers from entering are our nerves. I want to ask you, did you ever have a problem with being nervous before a performance, whether it was competition or on stage? Is nerves a thing that you faced?
Of course, and still do. I think, you never ever get over that thing about being nervous. I mean, I was nervous about doing this tonight, but it's
Me too.
I think nerves are, again, necessary because you can use them constructively. They only become destructive if you're not prepared. If you're not prepared, you're nervous because you don't know what's coming next, and you're frightened you're going to forget, or you're frightened. But if you were thoroughly prepared, those nerves can sort of turn into excitement. I think there's a lot of pressure on people to feeling that they're being judged all the time, and in a way, we are. If you put yourself out there, some people are going to love you, and some people aren't going to like you, and you've got to try and just take that on the chin. It's hard. But at the same time, nerves about actually performing, I think, should be converted into excitement rather than
Wonderful.
Fear.
Can I ask you, this may be a personal question, and you may want to keep it to yourself, but was there any way that you found very efficient in transferring those nerves into excitement? Because sometimes, they kick in right as you're about to walk on stage, or when you're backstage. Was there anything in particular that was your go-to to help out with your nerves?
Well, I still have a system where when I know there's a particularly tricky passage coming up, or a phrase or something that, it could cause a problem if you let your nerves get the better of you, I switch off my brain completely. I write in my score ice cold, so that, I switch off and I just think about what I'm doing technically. Because sometimes I think if you're carrying yourself along in the emotion of the character, and you let the nerves take over, then you can come a cropper. But if you've done the preparation and you've really worked really hard in the rehearsals, and you've taken yourself to the sort of edge of the emotion, or whatever it is that you're trying, whatever the emotion is you're trying to portray, then you have to kind of bottle that. You have to be able to know how to access that, and to step back from it in a performance, so that it'll still come out, because it's been beaten into you during rehearsals. You've trained yourself, but at the same time, then you can just take one little step back, and you can sort of almost watch yourself sing it and analyze how you do a certain phrase.
Oh, that's amazing. I just wanted to ask, is this even applicable to young singers who are going to auditions for conservatoires, competitions, even like local competitions? Is this something that you'd advise for young singers?
I think the advice I'd say to anybody, any singer, is if you are prepared, you're 99% of the way there. If you're not prepared, anything can happen. So, of course, anything can happen if you are prepared. Something could go wrong on stage. A colleague could, do something different, or you could lose your concentration, or it could be a noise, or there could be something dropping behind the scene. But the thing is, if you're really ready and prepared when you go to the first day of rehearsal, then you will be able to combat those sorts of things, and they won't sort of rock you. And I think the same with competitions or auditions. If you know exactly what you want to portray, what you want to give in that audition, and you've really worked at it, then even if somebody coughs or somebody comes in the room, or something goes wrong, you're still on the track. I think that's the key.
Oh, that's awesome. We have a question on YouTube from Victoria, and I know that you are associated with a few conservatoires, and you visit like the National Opera Studio. She would like to know, what do you think conservatoires are looking for in singers?
People who can tell stories. People who want to tell a story. That's what we do. We have the luxury of text. We don't have to imagine a story. We don't have to play an instrument and think, well, let me make up a scenario that I think this music could be. The words are there for us. And I think when people go to conservatoires to start out as a singer, I think the first thing that you latch onto if you're watching them in an audition is, do they want to communicate? Do they really feel the need to communicate this story, this opera, this song, whatever it is, to the audience? So I think that's one of the key things. Of course, you're looking for somebody with a voice. It's not necessarily going to be a finished product, but then what voice is a finished product? It's always work in progress. So, I think you're looking for talent, sort of raw talent, potential, and somebody who really feels it's important to communicate.
Oh, there we have it, Victoria. Get out there and tell some stories.
Yeah.
I also want to touch base with this next question, because we've already talked about you singing Queen of the Night, and we know where you are now and the journey from there. So we have a question from Antonida on YouTube. What advice would you give to singers with voices which may develop into dramatic voices, about repertoire to choose for auditions and like roles and performances now?
Well, I think the best advice I give is to never think you've got a dramatic voice, because I certainly didn't think that. I had no idea. If you'd have put £1 million in front of me when I was singing the Queen of Night at the Academy, that I would sing Brynhilda, I would have just laughed in your face and thought, this is absolutely not, no way. And I think the danger is when people are young, that people sort of say, oh, you've got the potential to be a dramatic soprano, and that sows a seed in some people's brains, or a dramatic, a held in tenor or whatever. And I think that sows a seed in people's minds that might not necessarily be constructive. So I would say, go to your lessons, sing your repertoire, develop naturally. Coaches and teachers, if you've got, good support, they will hear. This is what happened to me. People heard sounds in my voice and said, learn this aria, learn that song. And then it was sort of developing it that way. And of course, there's no guarantee that any voice is going to develop. I could have stopped at being the Queen of the Night. I did, there's no formula. A voice is unique. You have no idea how far it's going to go. So you just have to let nature, don't force yourself into being something with a title. I think you just have to let your voice develop naturally and carefully, always with really good technical support, and see where it takes you. You know, I sang The Queen of the Night in 1983, and I sang Brynhilda in 2001 or 2002. So it was a long time, you know, and a lot of water went under the bridge, but I went through a lot of repertoire to get there. You know, it wasn't an instant thing. It didn't happen sort of overnight. It was a lot of the lyric repertoire building up from sort of lighter lyric stuff into slightly more heavier lyric, and then, you know, going that way. So it just progressed with age.
Oh, that's amazing to hear, because you get so many young singers now who say, I'm going to be the next, you know, dramatic soprano. And it's so encouraging to hear from you that we should just sing with the voice we have.
Yeah, just be the first, whoever you are, you know.
Yes.
Really. You know?
That's really encouraging. Speaking of singing, your career and where you started and where you ended up, where do you think in the timeline was your break, your big break? Because, you know, from leaving the National Opera Studio, winning competitions, I saw your name on the program at the Kathleen Ferrier Award. I know that. Where would you say?
But there's a case in point about competitions. I went into that competition twice. I was in the final twice. The first year, it all depends who's on the panel. The first year, the panelists said, if we're looking for somebody to put into the profession tomorrow, we'd give the prize to Susan Bullock. But that's not what the competition is about. The competition is about potential. So I didn't win the prize. The second year, the panelists said, we're looking for somebody that we can put into the profession, and we can't find anybody here. So they didn't give me the first prize. I got the second prize. So, you know, that's the thing about competitions. You know, it's all in the lap of the gods. But going back to the question of the first big break. So after I'd done Glyndebourne, I went to the National Opera Studio, and at the end of the National Opera Studio, I joined ENO as a company artist, because they had a big ensemble there, and I was very much at the bottom of the pecking order, and I had little covers, and, you know, which was fine. I was 24 or something, 25, whatever. But then I was covering Pamina in the Magic Flute, and it was a Jonathan Miller production, and it was about to start after Christmas, and we all went back after the New Year to rehearse. I was having a coaching, and Jonathan Miller knocked on the door and said, can you come into this rehearsal room? Can you sing the duet with Papageno? And I didn't realize it was an audition, because the original singer had to withdraw. And so suddenly, boom, there I was singing Pamina, which was not in the plan. I mean, I think they gave me the cover, but they weren't expecting it to happen, you know. So that was one break. There have been several. A bit further down the line, I actually asked if I could cover Madame Butterfly. I just wanted to learn the role, and I wasn't really bothered about, you know, and I was happy to be a second cover or whatever. And then they said, yes, you can cover it, and maybe you can do 2 performances at the end of a run. So this was several years later. And then what happened was, again, I rolled up to the Sitzprobe because I just wanted to hear the orchestra. Of course, we didn't have a mobile phone. Nobody could contact me. I innocently walk in with my cup of coffee, and I'm told, get in the bathroom and warm up. You're singing the Sitzprobe. And then I went out, you know, for the day, doing Christmas shopping, got home late at night, found a message on my answer phone saying, as of tomorrow, you are singing the role. So that was another huge kind of, always by mistake though, always by chance, you know. And then after that, I would say the leap from that into the sort of dramatic Wagner Strauss world was I sang at the old Garsington Opera, a Strauss piece called Die Ägyptische Helene, which was a huge piece. And I'd been working with the conductor Elgar House on another piece, and he said, oh, I think you could sing this. And I said, well, okay, fine. You know, I believed him, I trusted him. Wow. So I learned it. And then lots of people came to that and sort of said, oh, maybe you should sing Wagner. Maybe you should sing Brynhilda and Isolde. So there were sort of 3 pivotal points, really.
It's amazing that all 3 of these points were not only by chance kind of thing, but it was also about you being prepared.
Yeah.
You know, being prepared to stand on.
Yeah. Well, that's right. Because, I mean, there's no point in being an understudy if you don't know it. Because, you know, somebody could break their leg on the way to the theatre, you know, and if you're not ready to go, there's no point. you're not doing your job for a start. But I think the third time with the Strauss at Garsington, I mean, that it was becoming clearer then that maybe, I was singing roles like Yennefer and those sort of things, that maybe it was getting a little bit towards that world. And it was fantastic to do it in that sort of surroundings. It was very much like, it wasn't in a massive theatre. It was a good way to test the water, really.
It's amazing. It's amazing to hear that you started, and you're still singing now. You're still on stage. We have a question from Isabella on YouTube, who says, was there a specific moment in your career that you felt you had mastered your voice slash instrument?
No, no, not at all. I think your voice changes, your voice grows, your voice develops as you develop as a human being, and it reacts to you and to your situation, whatever that might be, emotional, romantic, whatever you want to, however it can be. And I think it's always a work in progress. And I think, there are things that change in your voice as you mature as a person. Certainly for women, things affect your voice, and you have to sort of go back to the drawing board and rejig the mechanism a little bit. So at this point in my life, things that I found harder 20 years ago are now easier, but then some of the easy things are now a bit harder. So it's always, I think you never feel you're exactly there. You've never really got it absolutely sorted. But of course you acquire a lot of knowledge as you go through your career, and good experiences and bad experiences inform you. And so, you remember to a moment when you think, oh my God, I really messed up that phrase. Why did I mess it up? And you analyze it, and then you realize, well, don't do that again. So I think it's constant. It's absolutely constant work.
That's heartening to hear that I'm going to be spending the rest of my career working on it. But that's how it is, right? The instrument isn't something that, like you put in a case and put away.
No. It's part of you, and it's a reflection of you. And without sounding sort of corny, it is a mirror of you as a person, and every aspect of you as a person. So, it needs lots of care and attention. You don't just sort of buy a car and then let it sit outside your house without sort of training it and tuning it up, and you need to kind of keep reassessing what's going on, because you will change. Good luck.
Here we go. We have another question from YouTube from Ted, and he asks, even after graduating from NOS, the opera world is very competitive. What advice would you give to current young artists about how to best make their way in the real world? The real world.
Well, I think it's really important that all young artists never feel that doing something like being in a chorus is beneath them, because I think when you're honed and trained within an inch of your life in a specific sort of highly charged young artist atmosphere, it could be that you think, right, here I come, Covent Garden or the Met or wherever. But it's probably not going to happen. Very rarely does that you have that immediate sort of pathway to great success. I think you can learn an awful lot from being a member of a chorus. First of all, stamina. I remember being in the Glyndebourne chorus, and we were working every hour, and I was commuting because I couldn't afford to live in Sussex. I had to, come up the train. So you'd get home late every night. You'd be up at the crack of dawn every morning. You'd get down there, and boom, there you were in a rehearsal, and you had to be giving. There was Bernard Haitink standing in front of you, or you couldn't just kind of phone it in. You had to be on the ball, and so that was a good thing to learn, discipline and stamina. And you watch and you look at the principal artists, and you can learn how to do it, and you can learn how not to do it as well. You can really absorb an awful lot. So I think, don't be sniffy about being in a chorus, because it's, if it's a choice between being in a chorus or not singing, then grab that chorus job, because you're using your instrument and you're learning, and and you may well get noticed and get an understudy or a small solo standout part from the chorus. So I think that's one thing.
Wow.
And I think just keep singing, just keep trying. It's hard. I know it's hard. There's so many different companies that, you just have to knock on the door and be the best you can all the time. Don't expect anything. That's the other thing. Nothing comes for free.
Wow, that's really useful advice for us young singers, especially in a world where everyone thinks they're the next Callas, and everyone thinks they're going to be the next Susan Bullock, and so like it's really nice to hear that actually you just need to be singing, and you need to be present.
I'm working all the time, and studying and searching, and you never stop learning. You never ever stop learning. And I think even when you're not working, then there will be patches when you're not, because it's very rare that people immediately go straight into full time, singing all the time. Then that's the time to really, benefit from it and learn something and study something really well, and keep asking questions. Going to coaches and asking questions, even of stuff it's
staying hungry,
important.
right?
You need to know. There's a lot to know, and we never know it all.
Yeah, I love how you're very realistic about it. Stay hungry, but be realistic. If the opportunity you're getting is in a chorus, that is where you should be for now.
And there are some fantastic singers in choruses who could sing all of us off the stage. That's what I'm saying. There are people are in choruses that you think, my goodness me, but they've made a choice, maybe because of family reasons or whatever, that suits them well. I'm not decrying, for goodness sake. I'm not sort of saying a chorus is a sort of not quite the stepping stone. I think it's a fantastic opportunity, and it's a wonderful. There are some wonderful, very classy singers in choruses around this country, apart from around the world, and we're very lucky to have those singers behind us when we go to the companies.
That's
Absolutely.
right. That's absolutely right. Even in my, I dare call it even a career, beginning of a seedling of a career that I've had, you don't walk on stage and sing by yourself ever.
No. And, it's a wonderful way for a young singer to really start to dip their toes into this world.
That's awesome. I just got a question from Victoria on YouTube, and she says, I'm considering doing British youth opera in the future. What do you think? What do we both think of it? I'll let you answer, because this is in conversation with you.
Yeah, I think British youth opera, is a really, again, a very good way to get out there, to be heard, to be seen. They do interesting work. They do, not always standard repertoire. It's not the old pot boilers. They do interesting choices. They get good directors in and good conductors, and you get a platform in London, in a theatre with an orchestra. Fantastic. What's not to love? Go for it.
Awesome. What do I think of it? I think you need to take any opportunity that comes your way. The position I'm in at the moment, I really have to take any opportunity that I get. If it's an audition, I will be at that audition and I will sing. If I get an opportunity to do a role, blessed. If I get an opportunity to do chorus, double blessed, because that means less pressure, because I'm not a principal, but I learn just as much from watching everything that's going on. And I know of the staff who work at BYO, and they're of a very high caliber.
Yeah, you should just, Try everything you can. Spread your net as far as wide as you can.
And pull it back in. If it's only one fish, that's what you're having for tea.
It's better than no fish, you know.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Going back to your career, I've seen on the internet and on your YouTube videos, you perform at some really cool venues. I have to say, you've performed from Australia to South America to UK, all over Europe. What has been the most, let's go with venue first. What has been the most interesting venue and space that you've had to sing in? Your favorite?
That's hard to say a favorite. I think, you know, when you get to walk in the doors of the Sydney Opera House, which you've seen for so long, you know, as this iconic building, this piece of architecture that's a sort of, it's the image of Australia, really, isn't it, in many ways? That's a pretty big moment. And, you know, you go to your dressing room and they've got these very long, narrow windows, but through that window, you see the harbour. The sea is there, the water's just there. That's spectacular.
Jeez, that's amazing. I have to say that I've seen those windows. I've looked through those windows myself from the outside.
Yeah. Well, one day you'll be looking on the inside. And then another amazing place that I found fascinating was Buenos Aires, the Teatro Colón in Argentina, because that's a real. In the old days of the Grand Tour of Opera, that was one of the stops. You know, there was the Covent Garden, the Old Met, and this Manaus in the jungle, and Buenos Aires. So outside Buenos Aires, the theatre in Buenos Aires is crazy. South America, cars hooting, you know, noise, racket, crazy stuff going on. And then suddenly there's this amazing, traditional, beautiful, big, huge theatre where you can just go poof, and it'll carry to the back of the you know, it's fantastic acoustic. And the thing I love the most about, I was there a couple of times, and the thing I love the most about it, which the audience probably don't even see, is that they employ guys who are dressed up in sort of powdered wigs. They sort of look like little Mozarts, and they page the curtains for you to take your curtain call.
Oh, wow.
So there's this amazing sort of bit of history, and it's fantastic. Yeah. So those two places. Where else? I was at a concert in the Serengeti in the national park, that was not a theatre, but that was kind of wild. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of places. I mean, the first time you sing at the Met, it's terrifying because it's huge. And if you don't imagine, don't visualize the pictures that you've seen of how big that theatre is. Actually, when you get on the stage, it just feels like any other theatre. It really does just feel like any other theatre.
I was just about to ask that because I've been backstage at Covent Garden, and from inside, you're thinking this massive theatre, and then you look at it from on stage, and you're like, oh.
It's quite intimate, actually, Covent Garden. I love the fact that it's sort of quite round, and you sort of feel wrapped up in the audience. You feel very close to them, even though it is a big theatre, but it does have that sort of coziness about it. Yeah, I love that theatre.
Geez, you've performed on most of all of the main stages of the world, and performing some really, really heavy repertoire. Asking about, you're going on to repertoire, how do you prepare for these heavy roles in terms of like, let's go musically first, and then we'll talk about the characters, the pacing.
It's a slow process when you learn a massive role, because, you know, just a role like, say, Brynhilda, you're in 3 of the 4 operas. So I think the first thing to do is not to sort of look at them all together, otherwise you'll just freak out and run away. But, you know, you take each piece, and it's the same as I've always learned anything, really, which is to do it a page at a time. And then don't turn the page until you know that page off by heart. There's no point in kind of skimming through it and thinking, yeah, I kind of got the gist of this now. It's not going to work. It's got to be absolutely sort of imprinted on your vocal cords and on your body. And if you don't do that amount of work, you'll never survive. You'll never survive the rehearsals. I mean, Sir John Tomlinson gave me a great piece of advice, which was never mark. Don't save your voice in rehearsals, because you need to train. And as he put it, you can't run a marathon if you've only trained to run 100 meters. So you really need to to, from the very beginning, sort of prepare it, not just in terms of knowing the notes, the rhythms and the words. I mean, you should know that anyway, but it's also the whole physicality of it. You know, and as you prepare, you begin to think about the character, of course, and, you know, what's happening to them in the course of the story. And so you start to formulate your own kind of mental picture of it, which of course may be the total opposite of what any director asks you to do once you get to the theatre. But at least you've got a story, at least you've got something, you've got a journey in your head. Yeah, so basically it's very slow, and you have to allow yourself plenty of time.
And
you
really lay out,
in a hurry.
Lay out, you know, page by page, and really acknowledge how long the race is going to be.
Yeah, and there's no point in learn. I mean, you know, and you can learn things very quickly if you have to, and we've all had to do it at times when, you know, somebody's called and said, "Can you come and do this in 2 weeks' time?" And you go, "Yeah, I'll do it." But probably 9 times out of 10 years later, if somebody says to me, "Could you remember that?" you probably wouldn't remember it as well as the pieces that you've really, really mapped out very slowly, very carefully, and not sort of left any stone unturned. That's the thing. Keep thinking all the time.
Wonder why you have such a good career.
Well, either that or I'm just a workaholic. I'm not sure. But I think, you know, for yourself as well as the performer, knowledge informed. You know, you're informed. You feel like you've got your armor on when you go on stage, when you're really prepared, and you think, well, anything can come at me, and I'll be able to deal with it. You know, I would hate that feeling of being on shifting sand. I don't think that's a great feeling at all. Yeah,
we've even, you know, being at the NOS and been in that situation where you feel like, oh, what's going to happen? But it's amazing to hear how you prepare these roles in terms of the music side. In terms of character side, what do you do in preparation for these characters? Especially dramatic soprano, you might sing some very dark characters that have very deep characters. How do you prepare for the character on stage, and what do you do? Do you leave them on stage? What do you do after a performance?
Well, let's talk about somebody like Electra. I mean, that is a character that you don't have first-hand experience of in your normal life. You know, it's not something that's common to us on a daily basis. So you have to really, you know, you have to do the background reading. You have to read, you know, the stories of her life and the history of that crazy family, and then you have to try and find some way of something in you that you feel you could find in that character, and vice versa. So it takes quite a lot of time to sort of to dig deep, and, you know, even if it's not the exact replica of what's happening between Electra and Chrysotomis, for example, you know, imagine how you would get on with a sister that you don't like, you know, those sort of things. So try and bring a bit of real life into it as well. And do I leave it on the stage? I try. She did start to make me nuts, I have to say. I did so many of them, and thinking those thoughts constantly are very, because they're not pleasant thoughts. You know, it's not a pleasant story, and it's difficult, and it's high octane, it's full on emotion. And I found that I got to a point when I just thought, I just don't want them in my head anymore for a bit. So I stopped singing it for a bit, and then picked it up again a few years later, and did one more, which was great. And now I'm singing Clytemnestra, so I've got the best of all worlds. I'm in a piece that I know backwards, but I'm singing a scene that takes 20 minutes, and it's a fantastic scene, and it's somebody else's go. Somebody else's go to carry the rest of the show, you know, which is great. But it's, you know, but all that information that you gather and glean over the years from singing Electra, you can now turn it on its head and see it from the other side, from the mother's side, which is great.
Oh, that's amazing to hear from award-winning Electra. We have a question from Ian on YouTube, and this I was going to ask this. So Ian, we're on the same wavelength. Should trainee opera students also learn some musical theatre rep or show songs to have up their sleeves?
I think it's that's an interesting question. If you have got the capacity to sing it stylistically well, then why not? But I think, there's nothing worse than hearing opera singers warbling their way through tunes that were definitely not written for their sort of voice. But I think if you can adapt your vocal style and sing it authentically, then why not? I've lately started singing Sweeney Todd around the place, which has been a lot of fun. But I did go to my teacher and ask him to teach me how to sing it in a kind of show voice rather than in my, opera voice. And that was a real journey of discovery, actually.
It's amazing. Always a student, eh?
Yeah,
always
of course.
hungry to find different colors in your voice.
Find a different way of singing, and how does that affect you? And I think it's useful repertoire to have if you can do it, but I think don't do it if it just sounds like an opera singer singing music theatre, because first of all, it's incredibly unpleasant to hear, and secondly, it's a bit of an insult to the people who do it so perfectly and beautifully and are trained in that way. So, we can't steal, we'd be a bit fed up if they started saying, right, well, we've sung music theatre all our lives, but, we suddenly think we can sing this. I mean, there are horses for courses. And I think that both worlds can interact perfectly well. But I think so long as it's done with style and taste and it's actually stylistically correct, that would be good.
The reason why I really wanted to ask this question is because of your fantastic performance at the BBC Proms. It's the first thing that came up on YouTube when I searched your name. How was it singing at such a prestigious event?
Is this the last night of the Proms?
Yes, the last night of the Proms.
Well, it was surreal, really. I mean, you cannot for 1 minute you cannot allow yourself to think of the millions of people that are watching you live. You cannot, otherwise you'd just go to jelly. And even your greatest technique of dealing with nerves wouldn't stand a chance.
It's making me nervous just thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, the Albert Hall is packed, so it's 5,000 more maybe of people right in front of you. But the atmosphere it's like one great big party. Everybody's there to have a great time. All the audience have been there for days and days and days, weeks on end, watching endless concerts. And now it's like the last night of term. Everybody's going crazy and having a party. So there's a very good, everybody's willing you to do well. Of course, it's nerve-wracking, but it was thrilling and it was a privilege. So what can I say? Fantastic. Great highlight.
It looked amazing. And you could feel the energy even through the video. That's the amazing thing about that video.
Well, the audience really feeds you with that energy. That was what was fantastic. You really absorbed it when you walk on, and they're all yelling and screaming, and I felt like a bit of a rock star, to be honest. It was great. It's the nearest I'll ever get. But it was great.
Oh, nice. I also want to ask, just quickly, I've seen that I've looked you up on Spotify, and you have some amazing songs down in recording. And what advice would you give to young singers who want to be opera singers? Do you think that song is also just as important?
Absolutely crucial. Absolutely, it's imperative that you never stop singing songs, because in a 2-page Schubert song, you can find as much drama and as much color as you can get in 20 pages of something else. You have to make a story. You have to make a drama and tell that story very quickly. And you have to contain. You're not trying to fill a massive, great big theatre. So you have to find a way of singing, in a different way to portray these songs and not overblow them, and find the style. And it uses the core of the voice. It keeps the core of the voice absolutely fresh and clean. Which is paramount to having a long career. If you can't sing quietly, then you will never, ever survive. If it's all about loud and blowing it out, The core of your voice has to be preserved at all times, and that's where everything else comes from and goes back to.
Sorry, I want to ask another question about singing loudly. Do you feel like you ever sang at 100%, or did you always reserve that extra? Did you walk out and just give it as a dramatic soprano?
No, because if you do that, you've got nothing in reserve if something goes wrong. That's the problem. I think you should always just have something up your sleeve ready. Suddenly, if you feel, for example, you're 2/3 of the way through Electra, and suddenly the orchestra whips up for some reason, they all get going and get excited. If you've been going 100% all that way until that point, you've got nothing left. You need a little bit of a turbo boost every now and again.
A little reserve.
Yeah, absolutely. Always keep something in the tank.
Oh, that's really, really good to hear, especially from a dramatic soprano. We have so many young singers online, and I'm sure we're all wanting to ask you, what advice would you give to us young singers who are in isolation or are quarantining at home? What is the most useful thing that we can do with our time while we have this time?
Well, it's easy to say. It's not necessarily easy to do because, of course, it's very hard. And if we're being honest, it's quite hard to be motivated every day, all the time. So I think the first thing you've got to do is give yourself a break. Don't feel that you have to be working 7 hours a day, because it's not natural. It's not normal. These are extraordinary times. I think, give yourself a project, get a role that you think, I've dabbled in this role. I've learned the aria. I've learned a bit of a duet. I've never looked at the whole thing. Try and learn a whole role. Work on your languages. Find a song cycle that you've always loved listening to but have never looked at, and have a go at that. So mix it up, really, if you think your French isn't great, then study French. Get online and get a French course, but don't feel at the same time, don't beat yourself up if you're not putting 400 videos of yourself up singing on YouTube every day either. You don't. It's not the be all and end all. You have to. Everybody deals with it in a different way, and we none of us were ready for this. None of us know what's coming. We don't know how long it's going to take before we can all get back. So, I think you've got to roll with the punches. You've got to take each day as it comes. And if you get a day when you feel really active and ready to go, work hard. And then if the next day you think, oh, couldn't care less, give yourself a day off.
That's amazing to hear from you that, what I've taken away from that, which is really special, is not to beat yourself up about it.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to do that because you have so much time now to sit down
but
and
at the same
practice.
time, that's not the green light just to sit and watch telly all day either. You know what I mean? Put that remote away. Try and have some structure to the day, I think. Easy to say, I know, easy to say. I'm not saying I'm doing that every day.
We have a question, a final question from YouTube, from Victoria. Do you think it is useful for singers to have a solid basis in spoken drama to help with diction, etc.?
I don't see how it would do you any harm. I don't think it's imperative, but I think, if that's a part of the, if you've been involved in spoken drama, then that's always going to, all knowledge is good knowledge. All stuff informs you. So I think, it's not necessary to be for diction. I mean, diction comes from wanting to say the words, wanting to tell, wanting to communicate. So, but if you've had some sort of experience in straight theatre, for want of a better term, then great. It's going to add power to your performances.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that question. And now we're down to our final question of the evening. What will you, Susan Bullock, what will be the first thing that you'll do after this lockdown?
Go and see the sea.
Oh.
Yeah, I think so. Go and just stand on a beach and look at the water. Yeah, I get a lot of pleasure from the seaside and from remote beaches and just walking by the sea. I find it very comforting, and I think that would be a great balm for the soul after all of this is over.
Oh, that sounds really beautiful. I've just been asked on the chat as well, what would I do? After this lockdown, I'm ending my lockdown by going to New Zealand in 3 weeks' time. And New Zealand,
Wow.
yes, New Zealand are, they're on level 2 at the moment. And so I'll be going home to spend time with my family, but not until I've done my 2 weeks quarantine. Look, Sue, I just want to thank you on behalf of all the young artists who have tuned in today. You have shared so much with us, and we have so many things that we could learn from you. And I just want to thank you for your time this evening.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Just good luck, everybody. Keep going. Keep strong. We'll get there in the end.
Awesome. And thank you to everyone on YouTube who has tuned in. Thank you for your wonderful questions. Stay blessed and take care.